It may seem very insignificant to even some people, but for Métis people, I think it's a good thing and a big thing.
Tonight, a small change has a big impact.
There were women that were afraid that there were some actions towards them.
Plus, new details on the Canada connection to Nathan Chasing Horse.
Mostly a traditional dance of my culture.
And athletes let loose at the gala for the Arctic Winter Games. Good evening, Tansei Anine. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. The Trudeau government has withdrawn controversial amendments to its gun control legislation. Critics say it would have unfairly targeted a number of law-abiding gun owners, including Indigenous hunters. The amendments were withdrawn in a parliamentary committee Friday morning. APTN's Fraser Needham has more.
Members of the Public Safety and National Security Committee quickly reached unanimous consent, and two controversial amendments to Bill C-21 were withdrawn. They would have banned shotguns and rifles capable of taking a magazine of more than 5 rounds of ammunition. Nunavut NDP MP Lori Idlout was against the amendments because of how they would affect hunters in her riding. She says it is the right decision, but she will be watching closely.
It feels close to celebratory, but we should still be cautious because it's still in committee. It's a win for the NDP for sure, because we've been fighting to make sure that we're protecting the rights of Indigenous peoples.
The proposed changes to the firearms legislation were introduced by the Liberals in late November. And Government House Leader Mark Holland admits mistakes were made.
Look, what we acknowledge today is there was insufficient consultation, that more work had to be done to hear from Indigenous communities and from Canadians across the board. It is absolutely critical that this bill get adopted. It's important that we take handguns off our streets.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says it was his party that forced the government's hand. And like Idlout, he too will be watching closely.
He is doing this because he got caught, and because Canadians of all walks of life from across the country, law-abiding, decent, Indigenous Canadians, farmers, rural Canadians who follow the law, stood up with Conservatives and forced him to temporarily pause this plan.
Bill C-21 remains at the committee stage and still needs to go back to the House of Commons for third reading. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
In a Truro, Nova Scotia provincial courtroom, 4 Mi'kmaq people are facing charges of illegally selling cannabis from shops on the Millbrook First Nation. But as Angel Moore explains, they are within their treaty rights to do so.
I'm here at the Trudeau Provincial Court, where Matthew Cope and Darren Marshall Jr. are defending themselves after being charged under the Cannabis Act. Today, prosecutor Michael Taylor presented the Crown's case. 6 RCMP officers testified that after a long investigation and surveillance, they raided 3 cannabis stores on the Millbrook First Nation June 2, 2021. The officers seized cannabis, cash, and the buildings themselves. Cope and Marshall Jr. intend to defend themselves that they have a treaty right protected by the Constitution to sell cannabis. Next week, a date will be set for the trial to continue.
To Manitoba now, where a small but significant victory means Métis citizenship cards will be recognized as an official form of identification in the province. Our Sav Jonesa has that story for us.
Manitoba will officially recognize Métis Federation citizenship cards as ID at liquor stores and cannabis outlets. That's thanks to an exclusive APTN National News investigation that found cards were not being consistently accepted.
Sorry, but we are no longer accepting Métis. We have our second piece, like the other ID with you.
The Premier of Manitoba, Heather Stephenson, recently announced the change, closing a loophole in the regulations.
When law enables bullies, it's an unjust law.
Nelson Pruder is a Manitoba Métis Federation citizen. He tried to use his card at a Thompson liquor store earlier this summer.
It had always unfailingly been accepted at the store. But this one day, the lady there, she literally threw it back through the wicket, and nope, we don't accept this. We don't recognize Métis. I remember those words. It's like, oh, well, what's up with this? Like, that's discrimination. I became upset.
He says that he knew justice would prevail.
To deny who we are as Métis, you get up early in the morning and try putting your hand against the sun and stop that from coming up.
Liquor, Gaming, and Cannabis Authority will be working with retailers to implement the change. Pruder says the change reflects the spirit of Métis people fighting for their rights.
This deed, they're not accomplished in a few days or in a few hours. And centuries are only a spoke in the wheel of everlasting time. That's Louis Riel. So this small thing that we've done for Métis people, it may seem very insignificant to even some people, but for Métis people, I think it's a good thing and a big thing.
Sav Jonesa, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
We reached out to the province to find out the timeline for the changes, but did not hear back by airtime. A Thunder Bay police officer was sentenced today after he was found guilty last year for his role in the investigation into the death of Stacey DeBungy. Staff Sergeant Sean Harrison had been found guilty of neglect of duty and discreditable conduct in 2022. He will be demoted in rank from Staff Sergeant to Sergeant for a term of 18 months. Following that term, he will be returned to the rank of Staff Sergeant provided his disciplinary record remain clean. Harrison must also attend Indigenous cultural competency training within the next 3 months. The scope of the sex abuse case against Dances with Wolves star Nathan Chasinghorse is expected to grow a day after Tsuut'ina Nation Police in Calgary confirmed it was working with Las Vegas Metro PD in investigating Chasinghorse and that there may be cases in Alberta. The Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations is also weighing in. APTN's Leanne Sanders has the story.
As Nathan Chasinghorse is denied bail in a sex abuse probe, his history in Canada is under the microscope. FSIN sent out a press release imposing a lifetime ban on Chasinghorse and another alleged sexual predator, Cecil Wolfe, barring them from every community event and ceremony due to their alleged sex crimes. A member of the FSIN executive has confirmed a claim by former Vice Chief Kim Jonathan that they banned Chasinghorse from the FSIN powwow in 2015.
There was an incident in Saskatchewan at the powwow, the FSIN powwow, where he was asked to leave. There were women that were afraid that there were some actions towards them and they were afraid, as were some of the hosts or the host head staff at the powwow.
She says the alleged victim was brave.
When they came forward, they were very afraid for many reasons, repercussions in the circle, but also spiritual fear. They were afraid of that. They were afraid of the high regard that he had, not just in the powwow circle, but the high regard that he had nation to nation, having been a Hollywood star.
The Tsuut'ina Nation Police in Calgary, Alberta, also announced an investigation into Chasinghorse this week. Sergeant Nancy Farmer says they are looking at his time in Canada.
He would attend powwows right across Canada, as well as in through the United States. So he would do a powwow circuit and present himself from all intensive accounts as a medicine man.
Farmer says they are going through historical files as well.
I would say there is a possibility that he would be facing further charges here in Canada, yes, without question. And the historical part of things as an organization for us here at Tsuut'ina is that we want to make sure that we haven't missed anything.
Chasinghorse is alleged to be the leader of a cult called the Circle. Las Vegas police say he abused his position to physically and sexually assault Indigenous girls over 2 decades. He was arrested in January at his home in northern Las Vegas. Farmer says the case is particularly sensitive given Chasinghorse's claims to be a medicine man.
People go to medicine men to try and find their way, the reassurance, a spiritual kind of connection. And to have something like that betrayed within your own culture when all you're supposed to do is trust this person and to learn from the teachings and move on in a better way, it becomes very difficult.
APTN reached out to Chasing Horses public defender Michael Wilfong, but there's been no response. For Kim Jonathan, it's important that women are made to feel safe if they do decide to come forward.
Needing to believe and thanking those women for having the courage to come forward. That was so very difficult, but they had the courage to come forward regardless of this person's stature. So it was really powerful to see.
Leanne Sanders, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Tsuut'ina Nation Police are encouraging anyone with information to come forward. They can be reached at 403-251-9660 or by email. You can email info@tsuut'inapolice.com, or you can also call your local RCMP detachment. All right, we have to step aside for a short break. Still to come, dancing and drumming as the Arctic Winter Games wrap up.
Be myself, I guess. Yeah, just feel lively, feel free, and you dance. I don't know, just bring some kind of energy, I guess.
Welcome back to APTN National News. At the Arctic Winter Games, the girls 16 and under futsal match between Sápmi, which is parts of Norway, Sweden, and Russia, and the Northwest Territories, took place in Fort McMurray. The sport is similar to soccer, but played indoors. This match was dominated by Team Sápmi as they were constantly attacking, and their aggressive defense prevented the NWT from gathering any good scoring chances. Sápmi ended up taking the game 3-0.
It was a fun game, and nice that we won. And I think we played really good and had many chances at scoring goals.
And also in Fort McMurray, men's and women's wrestling took place at the Syncrude Sport and Wellness Center. Several weight categories took part in some physical matchups. You score points by wrapping up or pinning your opponent. In this match, Team Alberta's Alex Campbell started off hot against the Yukon's Gabriel Racine, but a late rally from Racine, including a pin, gave him the comeback win.
Oh my God, it was insane. He started off so strong, got 6 points off the bat. I thought it would be more like the last one where it was really close, but he really brought a different game. I was lucky that my coach was there, told me he's heavy on his heels so I could throw him backwards and get a few nice points. Yeah, it worked really well at the end when I got the 4 points right before the pin. That he was not expecting it, nor was I, honestly.
Well, along with sports, culture programming is front row and center at the 2023 Arctic Winter Games. Between rehearsals and collaborations, artists mentor one another for a grand finale of arts taking place this week. Our reporter Charlotte Moore-Jacobs brings us that story.
Under bright lights and performing for hundreds of spectators, they're in a league of their own. As athletes compete at the Arctic Winter Games in Wood Buffalo, cultural delegates from across the circumpolar north showcase their artistic talents, exchanging knowledge, customs, and traditions from their home nations. Motivated to learn dances that were at risk of falling out of fashion, the Tetlingwitchin dancers from Telege, Fort McPherson, Northwest Territories began performing together a year ago.
No, I just be myself, I guess. Yeah, just feel lively, feel free, and you dance. I don't know, just bring some kind of energy, I guess.
Cultural delegates have feasted, danced, and drummed together all week.
It's so interesting because there's other drum dances, and like the drum dances are different from like what I see like back home, and there's other like the way they also jig is different from ours.
The cultural gala takes place February 2nd and 3rd at the Keyano Theatre in Fort McMurray. On stage, the Inukshuk dancers, made up of local high school students from Hakaluit, share well-known Inuit legends.
proud they would be to see us perform.
And offstage, they've spent the week building friendships with other performers.
Like for me personally, it means like the world. I feel like Inuit culture, especially compared with like Alaska or Nunavik, like we're all very connected culturally. So to see different aspects of those cultures is very interesting.
The delegates have been captivating audiences throughout the week with pop-up performances. And tonight, the Yurok dancers of Alaska pull out all the stops, dressed head to toe in incredible garb. Drawing from the magic of the Aurora, Team Nunavik wows audiences through circus-inspired moves. Like many song and dance troupes, they have humble beginnings in their community, a Kuujjuaq youth group.
The youth back home wanting to learn these, so I stepped up with my boyfriend and started teaching them, and they made me grow into me today. Like who I am today is because of them.
At every turn, there's opportunities for leadership and social development.
Well, I met a girl, her name is Sarah, and I never heard waking in my life, and she taught me about that, and I taught her about throat singing as well.
It takes a lot of courage for Sami artist Saha to perform solo, all the way from her traditional Northern Territory in Norway.
It's made out of reindeer skin, and this is woddagat and barkekjøtt.
But she's proud to share her long-standing familial histories through the traditional music of yoiking.
But I think it's very fun to like come and explain and yeah. And I like that it's very personal because I tell about my great-great-great-great-grandma.
I would describe it as mostly a traditional dance of my culture and like something that I would love to do.
The evening ends with a group act, something this young jigger is very excited about.
I'm excited for the finale, which we've been practicing for like 4 days.
Charlotte Mort-Jacobs, APTN National News, Wood Buffalo, Treaty 8 Territory.
All right, it's time for one final break. When we come back, a Mi'kmaq MP takes issue with his riding being redrawn.
The overwhelming question that I get asked is, how could they do this?
Welcome back to APTN National News. It's time now for our photo of the day. This beautiful winter scene was sent in from CJ Lassard in Treaty 6 territory. That is an absolutely amazing shot. CJ, thanks so much for sending that one in. If you want to be featured during our photo of the day segment, you can email your pictures to share@aptn.ca, or you can tag us on Instagram. All right, now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, minus 16 in snow in Charlottetown and minus 15 in Halifax. Minus 5 in Cartwright and minus 31 in Kuujjuaq. Minus 18 and clear in Quebec City and minus 13 in Val-d'Or. Minus 5 and some snow in Toronto and minus 4 in London. Minus 7 in Wawa and minus 9 in Thunder Bay. Minus 27 and snow in Churchill and minus 17 in God's Lake. Minus 18 in snow in Barons River and minus 8 in snow in Winnipeg. 1 degree in Swift Current and minus 3 in North Battleford. Minus 7 in Buffalo Narrows and minus 23 in Stony Rapids. Making our way west, minus 17 in snow in High Level and minus 6 in Fort McMurray. 3 degrees in Edmonton and 9 in Lethbridge. 9 degrees in Vancouver and 6 in Bella Coola. 6 in Sandspit and minus 16 in Fort Nelson. Minus 9 in Whitehorse and minus 27 in Old Crow. minus 30 in Norman Wells, and minus 26 in Yellowknife. Minus 31 in snow in Inuvik, and minus 30 in Fort McPherson. Minus 35 in Cambridge Bay, and minus 36 in Whale Cove. Minus 34 in Resolute, and minus 34 in Iqaluit. A Mi'kmaq member of Parliament from Nova Scotia doesn't want the boundaries changed in his riding for the next federal election. Jaime Baptiste is not happy two Mi'kmaq First Nations would be removed. One of them, Eskasoni, is where he calls home. He took his case before a parliamentary committee on Tuesday. APTN's Fraser Needham reports.
Baptiste did not mince his words when given the opportunity to speak to the Procedure and House Affairs Committee.
The overwhelming question that I get asked is, how could they do this? In an era of UNDRIP, in the era of reconciliation, how can a commission, without any consultation or any hearing from that Indigenous community, remove the only Mi'kmaq speaking member of Parliament, the only Mi'kmaq member of Parliament ever in the history of Canada to be elected, take away his home community?
And Baptiste isn't the only Nova Scotia MP who is against the proposed changes. Fellow Liberal MP Sean Fraser says the Commission also failed to properly consult minority groups in his constituency.
On the procedural side, I was really disappointed, frankly, although I don't think it was a mistake made on purpose, that certain communities, including the Pictou First Nation community and important historic African Nova Scotian communities, that were not given an opportunity to give input.
And another Liberal MP, Lena Diab, says the diversity of her riding would be negatively affected by the changes.
Halifax West is the most diverse ethnically, linguistically riding of the province and has been for decades. They're decimating that.
But a Nova Scotia MP of another political stripe takes a different point of view. Conservative MP Rick Perkins says Nova Scotians had plenty of time to voice their concerns during a public hearing process.
All residents in Nova Scotia had ample time to share their views with the Boundary Commission during the consultation process in the spring, which ran for several months. The Commission vigorously advertised their locations, times and dates of the 9 in-person public hearings and 1 virtual meeting.
But when it comes to Indigenous communities, Baptiste says that type of consultation just isn't enough.
Posting a public notice does not count towards Indigenous consultation. If you make a decision that adversely impacts their rights, their ability to speak the Mi'kmaq language to their Mi'kmaq MP in a comfortable way in their own community, is something that they have a right to be heard if it adversely impacts them.
The committee will now issue a report back to the Nova Scotia Electoral Boundaries Commission for its consideration. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
All right, that's all we have for you on this Friday edition of APTN National News. If you missed any of our stories or you want to catch up, you can head to our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Daryl Stranger. For all of us here, thank you so much for joining us. Miigwech, have a great weekend and a great night.